morning, everybody, and welcome to our moved day of Lady B in the Ivors Academy, coffee morning stroke afternoon for today. But I'm joined by my lovely guests. I can see that Shadow and Naomi are still actually muted. We've been having a few technical problems with the update, so they're both, and Naomi's still muted. So I'm here today with Crispin, my fellow Ivors Academy member and the chair.
Hello, everyone.
Incredibly amazing job. Naomi, who's the MU Deputy Secretary, and rapper Shadow, who I know shares this interest of the streaming rates very close to his heart, like I do. So, guys, I'm going to let you maybe tell everybody a bit more about yourself. Shadow, do you want to have a little go first?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Shao Dow. I'm a professional rapper and manga author. I've been a full-time musician since I graduated university and been making a living from my music for the majority of my adult life. I won the Hardest Working Artist Award at the AIM Awards 2017 and spoke in Parliament on behalf of small music venues around the UK. I live music. It's what I do. It's what I love. It's my passion, and it's my entire life. And the performing live is one of the main reasons I got into music in the first place. And suddenly that's all disappeared, and I am painfully aware of the fact that my income is not entirely sustainable from one of the things I love to do, which is just to make music and have people listen to it. And it's always been a point of contention for me that streaming pays artists so little, considering I started my career by traveling around the UK and selling my CDs, my actual albums, myself to people. So yeah.
Well, we're gonna be getting onto that in way more depth very shortly. And Naomi, good morning. How are you today?
Good, thank you. Yes.
So what's your little story?
Well, so I'm Deputy General Secretary at the Musicians Union. We've got 32,000 members. We've got musicians from across the whole spectrum. So we've got featured artists in all genres, session musicians, orchestral musicians, songwriters and composers. And we've come together with the Ivors to launch this campaign, you know, because essentially the live sector's down. A lot of our members are not earning at the moment. A lot of them fall through the gaps of the government employed and self-employed income support schemes. So obviously our attention has turned to how much money they make from recorded music, and it's not enough, essentially.
Well, it's clearly become evident because of the COVID that no one can sustain a career from, you know, from streaming royalties alone. But it's wonderful. I mean, on behalf of all the songwriters, we're so thankful for you guys creating this campaign and forming this alliance together. And Crispin, good morning, sir. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I started off ages ago as a kind of in a Britpop group called Longpigs. I then stopped and I went and worked in politics because I thought that was the way I could change the world, if having failed to change the world in music. And but then I couldn't stop music from haunting me, because it's like that, you know, those great prophets, the new radicals said, you know, don't let go, you've got the music in you. Music is kind of, it doesn't let go of you. So I found myself kind of in the back of parliamentary select committees humming into my mobile phone little tunes I had ideas for. And so me and a few friends got together and tried to have a go at writing some songs for other people, and luckily that's been quite successful for me. I've written with people like Florence and The Machine and Lana Del Rey and Yumi at 6 and people like that.
So it's kind of giving you a really good balanced perspective from all sides of this industry right now then.
I think so. Yeah. But I also got really, you know, I got sort of energized by the idea that, you know, there weren't enough people apart from the Musicians Union kind of fighting our corner. So I got very involved initially in the Featured Artist Coalition, and then because I was more of a songwriter than a featured artist, I joined the Ivors, and now it's my great honor to be the chair of the Ivors. But But I think we're at a really critical kind of watershed for music, literally a watershed, because a watershed is where a stream turns into a river. And that's what needs to happen in music at the moment. The streaming, streaming is, the future is incredibly exciting in streaming. And it could provide a fantastic, life for us all. Music is absolutely everywhere. And I think during the lockdown, music has been more vital to the world than
mental health.
Yeah, but we've got to ensure that the kind of engineering of streaming needs to be retuned. It was set up in a way which, I think kind of perhaps only irrigates a particular sector, and it needs to irrigate the entire floodplain. It needs to provide a future for the whole of music. Can I just make one more point? I think live is live only became the major source of income for musicians. You used to play gigs in order to sell records, and then records became free. But the truth is that records are making loads of money at the moment, and there's loads of money, people, being made from recordings. Whether that's coming back to, and what we've now got to do is have a kind of society-wide conversation to work out how the value of those recordings, not only from kind of YouTube, which is industrialized piracy, but from Spotify and Apple and the streaming regimes, we've got to make sure that a sustainable value comes back and is shared across the entire music community, so that all areas of music can flourish in the future. Otherwise, it's really myopic. It's biting off its own nose to spite its face.
I mean, for me, I think there are a couple of, there's so much for us to discuss here this afternoon. But for me, for the new up and coming artists, they probably haven't had a knowledge of how much money we used to kind of make and how much our income has been decimated. I had a hit with an artist twice, the same number one with an artist twice, but within like a 10 odd year age gap. And I think the first time I made 25,000 on this dance song, and 10, 12 years later, I think it was like 1,200 euros. That was it. That's a massive difference. I mean, our income is absolutely decimated. We have a lady, Emily Phillips, who's an amazing songwriter on our committee, and she actually worked it out that with childcare, paying for the artist to come to a studio, she actually lost money on the cut when after all the streaming rev. So that's what would be really great for us right now, is maybe if we can talk about some of the issues that we've got and how we feel we can fix them. So maybe a good place to start is to talk about, for everyone out there, how much songs actually really earn from streaming. I don't know if one of you'd like to take that.
Well, as far as I understand it, from the artist perspective anyway, I get in the region of 0.004 pence per play, which is about a fourth of a penny. And it's so funny now that I actually turned it into a joke with my supporters and followers, where I'm performing and I'll say, this is my new song, go stream it. If enough of you listen to it, I'll be able to buy a Kit Kat. And it's funny, but it's also true, because the amount of money I do get from streaming is probably enough to buy a couple bags of Quavers or something like that. The irony was actually, at the next show I did, one of my fans actually brought me a Kit Kat, and I really actually don't like Kit Kat, but I ate it because he brought it for me. So now I say things that I want people to buy me in the hopes that I get them. So
I find I'm doing the same. When I sell something, or if I buy something and I see something, so say I sold something on eBay the other day for £5. I was like, oh, that's 1 million streams that would have taken me to have got that money. I'm doing these equations now, and it really is quite scary, isn't it? I mean, we found out recently from an organisation, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, so I won't mention who it was, that it actually is impossible for songwriters to sustain a career solely from streaming rates now. Which is pretty appalling, because it's not that the money isn't there. The money is there. I mean, maybe one of you guys know, was it the Universal or Warner Group made, was it $1 billion or something?
Well, the
first quarter?
Yeah. the major labels, you know, the Sony and Universal have both had billion-dollar quarters, and you know, there's a lot of money in streaming at the moment, you know, an absolute a lot of money. And you know, to give them credit, the streaming services aren't perfect, but they are paying out 70% of their earnings. So £7 out of your average user's £10 goes to the music industry. What we need to kind of understand now is why isn't that going to the people who create the music? I mean, and whether we need to look again at kind of where contracts are. Of course, I mean, because contracts are still based upon, what we've done is we've tried to kind of reverse engineer what was the kind of vinyl and CD model into a completely new paradigm with completely new costs. So you know, deals are based on a manufacturing industry. And the industry is no longer a manufacturing industry, it's a marketing industry. Yes, there's, you know, Warner, I mean, Warners are now, Warner Music Group, who ironically are about the most artist friendly of all the music groups. I think they're really good. They sustain people's careers, and they will not, you know, there was one statistic from Universal where they were dropping 60% of their artists within the first year, which is pretty rough. Wow. You know, that clearly doesn't work for people, but you know, Warners are now doing a big share sale. They're kind of cashing in on the new revenue that they're making, and fair enough, they can do that. They've invested in the music industry, but they're
for our viewers, Crispin,
yeah, I've run out of steam. Sorry, keep going.
So, but for our viewers, would you explain, because obviously some people don't know how that pie is actually being split up. I think we should just really break this down. Where is the money going? What percentages and who's getting what?
Part of the problem is the lack of transparency, isn't it? This is one of the things that our campaign is trying to get at, is really how much money is in the system, where's it going, you know. Roughly, we think that about 13% is allocated to the song, about 30% to the platform, 57% goes to the label, which is shared with the artist, but, you know, tons of lack of transparency around how that's apportioned to artists, and obviously it depends on the individual deal. And I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
But with that 13%, Naomi, is that for independent unsigned writers, or is that going to signed writers? And if it is going to signed writers, then obviously you've got a minimum of probably 25% for signed deals, and then obviously maybe 10, 15 to 20 for admin as well.
Yeah, it's divided between the publisher and the songwriter, but it could be 80-20. So, you know, at least with the songwriters, they are getting a decent chunk of that on the whole. But it, you know, we would say that the song is generally undervalued and that it should be a higher percentage, you know, maybe more 25%.
I mean,
yes.
What's really important about this campaign, I think, is it's the first time ever that, you know, the music industry has kind of divided and ruled, or not the music industry, but the music business for some reason has divided and ruled all the people who make music. And I think, you know, I always sort of joke that the internet may well have, or digital up until now may well have decimated our incomes, but it does allow us to organize like this. We can meet and we can share ideas. And as a result, I think it's got to that point where people are sharing enough information, sharing enough ideas that we understand enough how the business works, and we have a right to question it and hold it to account. You know, this is the industry invests in us, and personally, I don't agree in being able to kind of sell your copyright. People shouldn't be able to buy your copyright. They should only be able to license it from you, because it should belong to the creator.
I agree with that.
It's the fact that copyright has become an industrial product rather than a kind of creator's right that has led to all of the big battles between Google and you know, Disney. But fundamentally, you know, they are the industry is the guardians of our work, and our copyrights, and they should be able to withstand really robust scrutiny. And that's what we're calling for at the moment, is some really
do we
robust
have
scrutiny.
support? And do we have support from the government? Because I know that obviously, you know, companies like Google hide behind Safe Harbor and NDA. What's kind of your stand on all of that?
I mean, so obviously we're looking for a government review, because we think that if a select committee decided to look into it, for example, they could actually get sight of some of the deals that are covered by non-disclosure agreements. I think we have a certain amount of support. You know, we've certainly got supportive MPs on the select committee, the DCMS select committee. When we were lobbying for the EU copyright directive, which might have solved some of our problems, but not all of them, Boris Johnson famously tweeted against it, I think, didn't he?
He said this is a perfect example of terrible European legislation. But I think that was just a kind of glib, glib Brexiteers comment. I don't think he'd really looked into it. There are other people like Matt Hancock, who actually was culture minister at the time, and he fought really, really hard for it, because he understood that it's unfair that the point is that YouTube are an incredible, brilliant streaming service. They're the best streaming service on the planet. They've just got to admit that they're a streaming service and pay the people whose work they stream in the same way. And they can afford to do that. They can afford to do that. The battle for the copyright directive wasn't anything really, I don't think, to do with copyright. Google can afford to pay for copyright. It was about privacy, because copyright and privacy are basically the same thing. It's all just information that belongs to its creator. And privacy is the internet's business. Our private lives are what they sell. And so if they could weaken copyright, they could weaken privacy. So we were kind of pawns in a bigger game, I think.
So basically we're just saying we need some transparency. First and foremost, do we feel that we could be better represented on these deals when they're being done? Do we feel that PRS maybe could, because I've always had a little bit of concern, and I mean this with no disrespect to anyone, but obviously the PRS is supposed to be the writers' organisation, but the main voters on it are actually all record company people, and it's incredibly hard to get voted. Hang on one second. It's very hard to get voted onto that board. Thankfully, though, we have yourself, and we have Tom from Gomez and Jim's and Michelle Escoffrey. So we do, thankfully, now have some songwriters representing us in that. But I was just wondering if you felt that maybe it would be even better if they threw it out to more songwriters for us to voice our opinions, or is it for organizations, for songwriters to join people like the Ivors Academy to be able to have a voice?
Well, they should, of course, join the Ivors Academy in order so that we can combine our voice, because really, I mean, that's this is a time for collective action, and collective leverage is the only way that, I don't want to sound socialist, but I tend to. So, but the workers can have some kind of rights with the owners. But to give PRS its credit, I'm a director of PRS, and PRS strives incredibly hard to increase the value of the song. The people on the board are not labels. That's wrong. They are publishers, and they work incredibly hard for publishing. But at the same time, the entire market, it's a bigger problem than that. It's a bigger PRS, joined together and fought incredibly hard in order to sort out the European Copyright Directive, which will hopefully mean that the big streaming companies like YouTube have to admit that they're big streaming companies, which would be great, because YouTube is 40% of the world's music consumption and only 4% of its revenue. And they, and they pretend, this is slightly going down a cul-de-sac, but they pretend, they claim that they are exposure. There is no such thing as exposure anymore. Everything is distribution, including the radio. So the radio can't say, well, we're promotion for your music, because actually they're just distributing to 10 million people at the same time. So radio needs to pay us more, and so do streaming services, because live, yeah, we always played live gigs. You know, you can't tell us, they can't say it's progress that we should go and sell t-shirts and mugs at gigs. Gigs is our business, but it's an annex to what is our real business, and our real business is making music. And how do you put that music out there? You record it. So we need to see a fair share of those recordings.
So Shao, I think am I saying your right name right now?
Shao Dow.
Okay, I just said Shao Dow.
Yeah, Shao was fine. What I was going to say is,
I was curious to hear what you were thinking, actually, because you look like you were having a lot of thoughts going on there.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, from an independent artist's perspective, and certainly from my perspective, I can't speak for all artists, but when it comes to how much you get paid for streaming and all of those sorts of things in the inner machinations of the music industry, I would really just like not to care. I would just like to make music, you know. I'd like to do my job as an artist, go out there, write songs, put them out there, and know that I can make a living from what I do. The reason I care so much about this is because I can't. Because, you know, I'm not being paid a proportional or at least fair amount for my hard work. I'm having to do X amount of other things. I'm an author as well, and my book is currently selling far more than my actual music, despite the fact that I'm a musician first and foremost. That to me is insane. I've got X amount of thousands of streams on YouTube. That's not going to pay my bills. It's not going to keep my lights on, and it's not going to allow me to continue to make music. I'm literally making music because I love to do so, not because of the great amount of wealth that it brings me. And I certainly don't think anybody should become an artist, a musician, a rapper, or anything like that for the financial remuneration. But I do think it's incredibly important that when you look at your figures and you see thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people listening to what you do, there should be at least some sort of correlation with your what's the word I want, compensation for that hard work, for that effort, for that energy. And the fact that there isn't is the reason why why I'm so passionate about this. And I'm so glad that the Musicians Union and the Ivors Academy are so passionate about this as well. I do think more artists, more pure artists who just make music need to get involved in this and need to be taking it more seriously. But realistically, we shouldn't have to be taking this on. We should just be able to make music and be able to live from that.
You are saying exactly how I feel. I mean, would I be on the Ivors Academy, you know, songwriter committee if I didn't have to be? I feel I've had to find this passion for fighting for songwriters' rights because it is so unfair what's happening right now. I mean, that's the truth of it. It just isn't. It isn't fair. You know, the hours that we work are very, very, very long, and you know, we're not getting compensated for our hours or our work. In fact, I think it's practically impossible. What is the average stream? Is 200,000 right now, and I mean, when you think of the earnings on that. But you know what? This also brings us down to data, and you know, when we're talking about data, is all the data being processed correctly? So are we even getting all the money that we should be? Should it be a user-centric system?
Yeah, I think we really should, because Shao's got a very good point there. The trouble is that the way that streaming is engineered or manufactured so that it you know, all the money from all the subscriptions goes into a big pool, and then it gets shared out between, you know, if Drake had 10% of the streams that month, he will get 10% of the money. And so even kind of independent artists who own all their rights and all their publishing, their share gets diluted accordingly. And the problem, you know, the other problem is that in lockdown, when people are streaming twice as much music, the musicians don't get paid twice as much. Well, I mean, the session musicians get nothing, which is criminal. But you know, but the artists don't get paid twice as much. In fact, they get paid half as much per stream because it's the same pool. But there's a possible solution to this, which is gaining an awful lot of traction, which is called user-centric, whereby whereby if somebody listens to just jazz or just hip hop or just indie, then their £10 a month will go to or their £7 a month, because Spotify will take 30% of it, £3 a bit. They provide a good service, arguably. I think it should go down to
And
about
it's not just
£2.50.
Spotify as well. I mean, there are so many
Apple,
streaming.
Apple, Deezer, all the rest of them. But their money will go to the artists that they listen to. And I think that will reconnect fans. What the engineering is doing is there's a disconnect between fans and the music. And always in the past, music, the ecosystem worked. I mean, people talk about the music ecosystem, but it worked because, you know, heavy metal fans used to buy heavy metal records and go to heavy metal gigs, and that meant that heavy metal was successful. And if there were lots of heavy metal fans, then heavy metal became the kind of dominant platform. Whereas at the moment, you know, hip hop based R&B, which is the kind of dominant pop format at the moment, 25 years ago, that was a fringe on the corner of, you know, on the streets of Chicago and New York. And I don't think under the current system, it would have got the oxygen to have been able to have succeeded and surfaced in the same way as it is now. So it's really myopic, the way that the thing is engineered. And also, if we're serious about you know, we're in a terrible, terrible crisis at the moment. And what's happening in America is unbelievably bad. And we have to make sure that the world comes out of this. You know, we're again at a massive watershed, but it could go either way. It could either come out of this with a demand from the people for a much fairer, much better, much more proportional world, or it could go the other way, that we have to ensure it doesn't go and turn into 1930s Germany, which it reflects an awful lot at the moment. Anyway, I don't want to get too political, but we have to make sure that it comes out the right way. And
I saw this morning that some of the labels are donating money, which is incredible that they're doing this. But I did think when they put that as well, a little bit of me did think, well, it would be really great if they want justice and fairness to actually address how they're treating their own people within the music community, because they're really not, are they? Have you guys got any thoughts on that?
I think, you know, certainly from a performer perspective, like the major labels, I should say, are, you know, a massive piece of the puzzle that we've, you know, and we're not going to get them to come to the table and talk about reducing their share easily, or about reopening contracts for artists who are signed pre-digital, who've got really appalling deals and get less than 10%, or are undercooked, so get absolutely nothing from streaming. And you know, it's going to be a really tough fight. And, you know, I'm glad that we've come together to launch this campaign. I'm glad that there's also the artist-led kind of broken record campaign as well, because I think that can come from artists. Yeah, that's got a lot of traction, and there's been a lot of debate, and it's the right time because people are super angry about not being able to earn any money and looking at the paltry amounts of money that they get from streaming. So yeah, we've got to get the major labels to talk to us about this.
So how are we gonna, sorry, Shao, did you have any?
Yeah, just really quickly, because I mean, I'm independent. I've never been signed, so everything I make is out of my own pocket, and hopefully most of what I get back comes back into my own pocket. But as I'm sure you know, in the music industry, there's always little hands reaching in. But in regards to the broken record campaign, that really useful graphic which showed how many streams an artist would need in order to make minimum wage. Yeah, I posted that on all of my socials, and a lot of my fans were horrified by that. And they were asking me, you know, okay, so where do you want us to stream you? And my answer is, to be honest, I just want you to listen to my music. I just want, you know, I could direct you to my website and ask you to buy my album, but I know that because of the ease of streaming, we're never going to get back to that point when people are buying physical CD more than they are streaming music. And if I have the choice between either trying to get you to buy a physical CD or just listen to me and enjoy what I do, I'm going to choose to listen to and enjoy. But it doesn't alter the fact that this is really hurting my ability to continue to make music into the long term.
The reality is, if you can't pay bills and you can't set that time aside to do the music, it stops. And that's fundamentally what's going to happen because we're all smashing up against brick walls. I mean, the PRS, I'm going to share this fact. I sit on the steering fund for some of the PRS funds to help songwriters, the hit maker and everything. And the reality is there are pro writers applying for this funding right now because they can't afford to survive. And these are people who are having hits with, you know, big artists, and and I saw the figures of what they were earning from acts like Galantis and stuff, and it's scary. It really, really is appalling.
We have to completely.
How do we fix this? How do we?
Just ignore CDs. I mean, my daughter doesn't even know what a CD is. You know, I got one out the other day and she said, "What's that?" CDs are gone. We have to sort streaming. You know, CDs. It's like selling, you know, vintage furniture or something. You know, they're gone, and they're only 4% of you know, the record labels' money in it.
I think Shadow only briefly mentioned CDs. He didn't.
I know, no, but we need to, you know, this is why we need to fix the future, not kind of revert to the past.
Yeah.
And you know, there is now really decent money being made from streaming, and streaming should, you know, it's brilliant that people are subscribing to streaming, and it could, you know, music could become like a utility whereby everyone pays, you know, it's such a great deal, £10 a month for all the music that's ever been made. It's fantastic, and people shouldn't.
There are obviously the pretty free ones as well, though, aren't there? There are free.
Yeah, with ads.
Yeah. I mean,
you know,
ads are dreadful because you have to kind of, you know, I work with artists who come in saying, "Oh, I've got a really, you know, syncable riff here," rather than a riff that will break your heart. You know, it makes people come because because YouTube plays stuff that Toyota want to advertise by. So anything interesting gets suppressed, submerged, and only the stuff that sounds like jingles comes to the top. We don't want to go there. No. You know, we want to get people to pay.
So how do we fix the future? Do you guys, obviously you've formed this alliance, we've got this wonderful Keep Music Alive campaign. What is do you have a plan of action? What are your thoughts?
I mean,
here.
Firstly, I think education for both the artistic community as well as the music listening community is a very good start, so that people understand, number one, where their money is going to, what it's being used for, and realistically how much the artists that they love are being paid for their hard work. And I think once you understand that, you might be a little bit more willing to adopt a slightly different method of consuming your music, maybe, or you might be willing to pay a little bit extra. Maybe we have some option for the fans to be able to donate directly to the artists that they love the most, or to buy merchandise directly from the streaming site, which is something I would have loved to see from ages ago, and I don't know why it hasn't been done. Ironically, whilst we've been talking, somebody just bought a wristband on my website, so wristbands are the future. But I think, no, I think it starts with education.
The donate button. Here's the biggest problem with the donate button, because when you've got a list of songs and a body of work, and that money's only getting assigned to the artist, surely it's music that's up there and all the songwriters are involved. So if you've only got one songwriter, it's easy, but if you've got lots of people, how do you divvy that money?
Very true. Very true.
You know, there should be, people are already spending £10 a month. Yes, the price should go up because it's been 10 quid for 10 years or something. You know, it should, the same, if it gone up with inflation, it'd be about 15 quid now. The price should go up, but I don't think right in the middle of a you know, massive depression is the right time to do that. There is lots of money in streaming. People just need to know that it's, you know, Shao's fans who are listening to his music, their money should not be going elsewhere. It should be going to Shao. And then Shao would be making kind of 5 times what he's making at the moment. And you know, and that's what it needs to be. And then we can grow it, and the fans will feel that they, you know, there shouldn't be a kind of charity box. We don't want busking by app where you're kind of, you know, oh yes, I really like this, but I know that the artist makes nothing from it, so I'll give them another quid. You know, you know, that's not how it should work. You know, the stuff, people value music, and music should have value. And the fact is that in the past, when record labels had to have you know, trucks and warehouses and factories and printing shops and stuff, they could justify taking, you know, 80% of the money. But I don't think they can any longer because they're marketing companies. And judging by the kind of 1 in 50 success rate that some of the majors have, they're not very good at it either.
So Naomi, how are you and the Ivors Academy, well, I say you, the MU, how are you going to, your cat, how are you guys going to approach the labels? What is the plan of action with that? Because I actually think the streaming actual fee is okay. I think, and you're right, Crispin, we're probably in a bit of a recession right now. We don't need to necessarily be looking at that, but the way that the pie is split up isn't necessarily fair. So with that in mind, how do we make it fair?
Well, I think that obviously our petition has got over 12,000 signatures now for a government review. So I think that would be fantastic if that came about. Obviously that would, as I said, throw some light on some of the deals in the industry that are at play here. I think we also should definitely be getting fans involved. So I think we've talked with the Ivors about whether we could do some consumer research, maybe asking people, where do you think your money's going that you pay for streaming? Just to talk about the user-centric issue. And I know Deezer have been doing quite a lot of work around user-centric. So there's potentially an opportunity there. Getting artists involved, but as I say, there's the broken record campaigns, that's already happening to a certain extent. And we've got to put pressure on the labels. So we can't allow this to go away. We can't allow this to be dressed up as being an issue with the value gap, i.e. what YouTube pay to labels and publishers. I think it's about more than that. With creator and performer organizations, we talk about the value chain. So it's not just about what the streaming platforms are paying. It's about how the money filters through to the whole system. Like you say, we shouldn't be in a position where when live falls away, 20,000 plus musicians are in like serious hardship within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
The recorded music industry needs to be able to sustain creators and performers.
I don't think it needs, I mean, talking about the value gap, I agree that, we had a battle over the last few years to try and sort the value gap, which was basically that the people who create content, that the technology platforms are taking all the value of that content that's created by giving it away for free and advertising next to it. But there's a second value gap that we are discussing at the moment, which is how much the people who actually, which has exactly the same premise as the first one, namely that the people who actually make the product, the creators, the musicians, etc., are not seeing enough of the value of that product, and it's quite simple. It's not going to be vast. I think there could be a kind of, I mean, there are a number of different, there are probably a million different ways that you could skin this cat, but there are fundamentally there are four elements to streaming success. One is the streaming service itself, another is the song, the other is the singer or the performers, and the other is the seller or the marketers or the labels. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with quarters rather than 55% to one, 13% to another? That's where the basis of the conversation should start. If we weren't trying to reverse engineer a physical model into a completely different paradigm, we would be looking again at how music should commensurately reward people in this new environment, and that's what we need to do. The other thing that we need to consider is that most songwriters and performers survive. Certainly I have all through my living. Yes, I got advances from record companies, but that tended to go to managers and equipment and touring and rehearsal rooms and paying people who sell your t-shirts for you on gigs. But how I actually lived day to day was on PRS and PPL income. Now Daniel Ek has kind of come out and said linear will die, meaning radio will die, and on demand will win, meaning streaming will win. And they're now moving into podcasts, which is a clear kind of aggressive land grab into broadcast. And if he predicts that we've got 20 years before linear will die and on demand will win, then we've got, in that 20 years, most musicians' livelihoods are going to evaporate. And the premise, the intention of those laws and those rights that were given to us by regulators all over the world will disappear. And that's why it's important that regulators should come in now and review their intention, why they gave musicians and creators valuable rights in the use of their music. And so we need to look again at the difference at what streaming is doing and how it can proportionately and fairly, you know, keep and holistically keep the music environment alive, because it's going to be the only game in town, because you can't do much better. So maybe we need to have a look at the difference between, you know, at the moment all streaming is considered a sale. You know, it's classed as a sale, so it all goes through contracts and through the record labels, etc., etc. But most of streaming now, streaming functionality has moved on. So all the streaming platforms, the only way they can compete, because they've all got the same product, is by curation. So they have curated playlists. You know, you play one track on Spotify and it plays you constant music until you turn it off. Maybe that bit of it, the push stuff, rather than the pulled stuff, should pay like broadcast. So it should go through PRS and PPL. And if you look at that, you know, that's you know, that's something that I think regulators really seriously need to look at. And I don't think you would need that big a change of the law. We don't need to go back to WIPO and, you know, the World Intellectual Property Organization and create new directives that the entire world looks at. All it would need is just a clarification of what streaming services are doing now and how they pay out.
What about the ratio, Crispin? So, because that's really interesting what you're saying about the push stuff. So say we've got because it's well known, if you've got a 100 million selling song, it's going to get more volume, more, it's, you know, the faster they go, the more they go up. So should there be a capped point where it should be, then the money should decline a little bit less to make it a little bit proportionate more the market?
Well, that's something that has been sort of talked about for a while, and it's not a bad idea, but again, it's another kind of arbitrary decision that you could say that the first, you know, 100 million streams of something gets paid X, and then the second 100 million gets paid X minus X, and so on and so forth. But it's a bit artificial. I think there's ways of ensuring that the market, that the streaming market is fair for the whole of music. And I think the streaming market, you know, I think it's market failure at the moment, and I think that's why regulators need to come in to check that the market works. And what you know, in Spotify, you know, Spotify have just introduced a thing, I think, where you can pay extra money to go on playlists. So you pay 200 quid to go on a playlist that makes you 70. It's bonkers. And in America, it was called payola, and it was illegal. Yeah. So why is it being allowed in streaming? You know? Wow,
that's very true. Do you think, I've got two questions for you all here. One, are you planning to speak to the record companies, and are you planning to have a sit down with them and a talk? And two, what can our community do to help protect themselves?
Well, I think it would be great, actually, if we could get some more artists and songwriters talking to us about their deals and talking to us about how much they're actually making. Because I think certainly when we're talking to the government, it's really important that we have case studies, because it brings it to life, and we need as much evidence as we can get our hands on. And because of non-disclosure agreements, it's incredibly difficult to actually get your hands on the data to make the point. But I think we definitely want to get the record labels in a room talking about this. The big question is, what's the right moment to do that? And it's a shame that we can't physically have that negotiation in person at the moment. Will that work successfully on Zoom? I'm just not 100% sure.
I think they will. I think that, I mean, the point is what artists and songwriters, what we can all do, and what's really important is that this has now become is becoming a global conversation. And I think it's becoming a global conversation not only because people love music, you know, this is basically fundamentally a sort of what we always considered was a trade issue, and it's been on page 3 in The Guardian, it's been in The Times, it's been on Radio 4, and it's basically because the conversation that we're having is a kind of microcosm of the bigger conversation that the whole of society is having about lockdown, about a kind of rebalancing of profit over proportion and fairness in society all in all. So in a way, music as ever is being the kind of canary in the gold mine for that bigger conversation. And so there's a lot of agendas that are playing out within this. And what people can do is, you know, this is the thing. We have the opportunity now to voice our opinions, and we have a right to scrutinize and hold the people who exploit our work to account. So go online, talk about it, you know, join, sign up the petition. The labels are talking to us, you know, at PPL. They are saying, okay, let's have a conversation about this. They know there is an issue, and in a sense, you know, I suspect they are, you know, and they're being very, very good at it, you know, and they understand there is an issue, but we, just like we have to understand that they're in a business, and their business has to sort of pay their shareholders. So it's difficult for them to say, yes, we'll take less. But the point is that if they're trying to cash in on the success of streaming, and we all want them to do that because we want streaming to be a success, and if they want the city to invest in the future of streaming, then streaming needs to be settled. It doesn't need to be a really turbulent stream. And if they sort out this turbulence that's going on at the moment, then I think streaming will be much more valuable, and they may have to take a kind of 5 billion quid haircut immediately, but they will make 50 billion in the future.
I was thinking more with regard to what songwriters can do as well. Obviously, join your fabulous campaigns. But I was thinking things like, well, we can make sure that our data is done properly, to make sure that we actually are getting the money. If the song isn't registered, you know, things like that, make sure we've done it all correctly at PRS. I was also thinking, you know, we could, you know, ask for a point of the master. I know that we've been endorsing this within the Ivors Academy. And also even we're looking at perhaps a daily rate from labels, as we are in a way investing in the artists. Maybe like doing a per diem thing. Obviously that wouldn't help you, Joe, would it?
Well, what I was going to say is a couple things. Number one, it's not just that people love music; they also love the artists, the human beings who make the music. And I think the average person, the average music listener, would be horrified to find out how much of a struggle it is for their favorite artists to just make a half decent living from what they do. From my perspective, when it comes to my streaming, my digital downloads, that kind of thing, I most of the time I forget that money's there because it's so inconsequential to my day-to-day life. Predominantly my income comes from live. It comes from speaking and educating other artists about how to build a business from their music. It comes from the selling of my merchandise, my book, etc., etc. Music is what I do, but it's not what is. It doesn't allow me to do what I want to do. And again, that's a big issue, and it's. I just think that whilst the labels are doing extremely well, and while certain facets of the music industry are doing extremely well, none of those would exist without artists. And that is the crux of the point. Without artists, without musicians, there is no music industry. Therefore, in order to maintain the music industry, you need to maintain the musicians. I think that has been forgotten, and that's been sidelined a lot. But without us, there is no music industry. And the sort of music I make is not necessarily for the radios. It's not necessarily for the mainstream. I don't ever want to be a worldwide touring artist. I want to have a very niche fan base. I want to be able to make whatever the heck I want to make and entertain the people who love that. That's not going to get me on the biggest Spotify playlist or the biggest Apple Music playlist. It's not going to get me playlisted on Radio 1 or whatever radio station, but that shouldn't preclude me from being able to make a half decent living for what I do, because I have a fan base and I have people who love what I do, and I should be able to continue to provide that service to those who love what I do, and be able to pay my bills from that.
I'm curious, honey.
Amen.
If you had the choice and music was paying the way that it should, fairly, do you think you would still continue to do some of the other things, or would you probably go back to focusing more on your music?
I would put a lot more focus into my music but the thing is, I'm naturally a person who likes to do multiple things. My manga series is there because I'm a big fan of comic books, and I always wanted my own comic, so I would still do that. But perhaps some of the other superfluous things which bring in the money in order to help me to make the music, but are still music related, I would tone back on that in favor of just making more great music. And just to go very quickly onto the point of the playlists, I have in the past paid companies who provide this playlist service, who send your tracks out to playlist curators to consider. It's very difficult because, of course, you want people to listen to your music. I don't want my music to be background music. I don't want it to just be on a playlist and you listen to it. Oh, that's a cool song, but you don't know who it is. But at the same time, if you want to make any form of decent income or have any form of half decent following at the moment, you have to be on the playlist. So you have to play the game. You have to pay this money, which fundamentally doesn't really guarantee you anything.
Wow.
You can pay thousands of pounds if you want to these playlist curators, but they don't guarantee you anything other than we'll send it to people. And if they don't like it, you've just lost a couple £1,000s. But how, as an artist, do you get your music heard unless you play this very this game, which is where the returns, the benefits are not proportional to what you're putting in?
Yeah, it seems it's the whole, from me, just talking to you guys and obviously being involved in this for many years, it seems like the whole, like, we'll call it the pie because it's always easier just to explain that to people, but it's just disproportionate right now. It really isn't, and I think it needs to be made fair.
Exactly, it's a question of balance, and one thing that we can all do is make sure that we have to get our data right. There's an enormous amount. I mean, you know, some reports say that kind of 20 or 30% of money is unallocable because people haven't got their data right. So, you know, every single creator, every single time you press bounce on your whatever, Logic, Pro Tools, GarageBand, you've got to make sure that you should sign your work, make sure your name is there, you know, from the get-go, from the moment it goes up into the ethers, that it's got to be traceable to you, because otherwise there will never be accuracy. You know, we will never get paid. And it's kind of inconceivable that in a world where I can make a phone call to my friend in Nairobi for 30 seconds and they can pinpoint that person in Nairobi and you know, charge me 26.5p per 30 seconds for that. It's inconceivable that we cannot have kind of proper accuracy now, and that so that every time someone's music gets played or used, it gets paid.
That is an absolutely fantastic analogy, Crispin. You should remember that you just said that, because that's the truth. If you can make that phone call and they can trace those two people and you know how much the fee is, why isn't this, you know, happening in music?
Well, you know, arguably in the past, because there's because it's been impossible, so people have had to kind of you know, invent analogies and work on things, saying that, oh well, you know, in clothes shops they mostly play Radio 2, so we'll pay like Radio 2's playlists, even though they weren't doing that. But nowadays, you know, technology is actually giving us the opportunity to make sure that if you're playing Spotify in your clothes shop, then every single track that you play should go back to the people who make that music, and it should be registered. So we need to get our data right, because there's too much, you know, being sort of, you know, the evergreen catalogue is only evergreen because it's been heavily overwatered by history. You know, it needs to be, and we don't need to do that anymore. We can irrigate the entire community.
Guys, we've only got a couple more minutes left, but I was very curious about this myself personally. Do you think we should be reaching out to other songwriting organizations? I mean, obviously this seems to me like a world problem, because obviously we're all in the music business. Your market's probably not limited to just the UK. It's like, you know, music gets played all around the world and there are these different rates. It's even more confusing when you think about the money, because it's different from territory to territory. So should we be trying to make a bit more of a united voice with other organizations? How do you feel about that, guys?
I think so, because I think actually it's going to be, I mean, we'll certainly try and reach a UK solution, but at the end of the day, you know, a lot of the big interest groups that we need to reach are actually based in LA. So, you know, I think it's got to be a global conversation. So yeah, I think it's a great idea to reach out to other organizations around the world.
I think it is a global conversation at the moment. You know, it's happening in America. It's happening across Europe. Everyone, you know, this conversation is out. The genie is out of the bottle. So, you know, everyone is going to have to at some point try to resolve it, because it's not going to go away. It's been suppressed for too long, and now the conversation has started, which is great, because that's the beginning of any kind of solution. But I would just like the copyright directive. America has. I mean, you know, America has a very different regime to ours. It doesn't have the same kind of rights that we have in Europe. And I think just like the copyright directive and sorting out so that, you know, this needs to start in Europe, because we have stronger copyright, and because, you know, from a creator's perspective or a musician's perspective, you know, that in Europe we have moral rights. In other words, you know, in France you can't, or in Germany you can't sell your copyright, because how can you? In the same way that you can't sell your children into slavery, even if they're begging you to be sold into slavery. It's part of you, and they have, you know, the French and the Germans have this, you know, the right of the author, and that's the work that's created. There's a moral sense that it exists. It's your art, and you have a right in that. And America doesn't have that. They treat art, you know, copyright as a property. So I think we need to, you know, it's stronger to sort of start this conversation off in Europe, and then to let that migrate over to America.
So I think, I mean, the final, because obviously with time is against us now, but I think the thing is, for fellow songwriters out there, I think let's take some advice from Shao Dow. Like, be innovative, try different things. You know, you really got to just let your creativity stretch out there. Make sure you're registering all your songs, because I fear this may not be a very, very quick battle, as we, you know, I say the word battle, but it's not a battle, a discussion that we need to have with the labels. And
it's a 3-year negotiation.
It's a negotiation, and it's going to take some time. So until that kind of happens, please support, you know, the MU, support fixed streaming, support Broken Records, support Keep Music Alive, join organisations, have your voice. But
make some noise. That's what we do, musicians, is we make really good noise.
So just any final thoughts from you guys before we head off? And then thank you so much today. Thank you. This has been very informative. I'm sure everybody's learnt a lot from today.
I just think that the path and availability of being an independent artist is now so much more possible in today's climate, and with the amount of technology available, but yet the constraints on the sort of income you can make and what you can do is still there. I think that every artist should be some form of entrepreneur. They should be abreast with lots of different topics and understand the industry that they work in. But fundamentally, they should just be able to make a living from their music if that's all they want to do. If that's all they want to do, and it's a fundamental shame that they can't. So you know, I am very, very passionate about this, and I'm happy to speak to anybody and everybody who needs to hear it from an artist's perspective. And you know, I hope that you guys continue to include me in these discussions where relevant and necessary, because I want to see positive change, not just for myself, but for the artists who are here now, who have unfortunately had to quit because they can't keep their lights on, and for the artists of the future as well. Yeah,
wasn't it the MU said is like 1 in 5 musicians are considering quitting, which absolutely is tragic. It's so sad. And it's a reality. I fear if lockdown continues or we go back in, it's going to be even more. Naomi, and I think you're on mute, hon, but what do you think for your final thoughts?
Well, yeah, if you haven't signed the petition, then please sign the petition, because I think we are obviously talking to MPs and other decision makers to try and throw some light on this issue. And all of the support we can get is very valuable indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Naomi. Crispin?
Yeah, my final thoughts. I think there is a solution to this. I think it's kind of, it's reached a point where perhaps kind of brought on by COVID and the fact that people can't, you know, people have got time to think about it. But I think now is the right time to be having this conversation, and I think we should all join in, because don't get your royalty statements and go, oh, get your royalty statements and ask questions.
I love that. Thank you so much, everyone. And I think from me, I would say this one thought that I think is so important. Don't let the business destroy your creativity, because the money might not be right. We still are musicians. We are still creative and artists. So keep making your music. And
sorry, can I say one final thing? So let's also not forget that these streaming figures, these are actual human beings. So if 2,000 people, if I have 2,000 streams, chances are that's close to 2,000 actual human beings who've listened to my music. Based on 0.004 pence, I would have made maybe in the region of £8 a play, for those 2,000 or so human beings who've taken the time to actually listen to and enjoy my music. Conversely, as I said earlier, somebody just bought 2 wristbands on my website. That's the same amount of money I just made. So that, to me, that does not make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Devaluation of music. That's what's happened. The devaluation. Yeah. And if just one final thought to leave you on, which is quite horrific. If you think that's bad, to make the national minimum wage, you need 1,200,000 streams on YouTube daily and 900,000 on Spotify to make the minimum wage. It's basically impossible. And so I shall leave you on that, and raise your voices up and help us in the fight to, you know.
Thanks, Victoria. And Shao, will you? I'm going to email you after this, please. Thanks,
Shao, I've got something to talk to you about, a newspaper article as well.
I'm all ears.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks
for listening.